Mistress took pregnant wife's seat at the dinner table. Billionaire only noticed when it was too late. In a lavish mansion perched high on a hill, an extravagant dinner party is about to begin. The guests chat in hushed excitement, knowing something big is about to unfold. Amid the sparkling chandeliers and priceless artwork, the air is thick with tension. On one end stands Alexander Harrington, the charismatic millionaire whose business empire has made him a legend. His pregnant wife, Sophia, gently rests a hand on her swollen belly as she searches for her husband. But just as everyone settles down to eat, another woman, a woman who shouldn't be here at all, slides into the chair meant for Sophia. By the time Alexander notices, it's far too late. Alexander Robert Harrington was no stranger to wealth or drama. Born into an affluent family in Boston, he had quickly multiplied his inheritance by founding Harrington Innovations, a tech startup that exploded onto the scene with cutting-edge software solutions. Now, in his mid-30s, Alexander had the golden reputation of a Midas-like entrepreneur. Everything he touched turned to profit. Journalists marveled at how his charm could sway even the toughest board members, and how his business intuition seemed to border on the supernatural. He and his wife, Sophia Hathaway Harrington, had been married for 3 years. Sophia was known among her friends for her grace and kindness. She'd grown up in a more modest environment, the daughter of a history teacher and a nurse. When she first met Alexander, she was studying non-profit management. The two struck up a conversation at a charity event. Their courtship was rapid and passionate, culminating in a whirlwind wedding on the scenic cliffs of Santorini. Despite the fact that Alexander came from wealth, something genuine in Sophia's heart pulled him closer. Their romance seemed to promise a fairy tale ending. Everything about them sparkled: his wide grin and tailored suits, her gentle smile and down-to-earth warmth. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect couple. That perfection took on a deeper glow when Sophia announced her pregnancy. A child would soon transform the glamorous Harrington household into something more meaningful, more grounded, or so everyone believed. As her pregnancy progressed, Sophia watched her husband become busier. Instead of slowing down to share in the joy of impending fatherhood, Alexander doubled his efforts in expanding Harrington Innovations. He was constantly traveling to conferences, forging new deals, and wooing investors. Though he lavished her with attention whenever possible, elegant date nights, heartfelt letters slipped into her handbag, there was a strain growing between them. Then came the name that threatened to disrupt it all: Cassandra Leclerc. She was a rising star in public relations, known for her fierce negotiation tactics and an uncanny ability to manage crises. Cassandra appeared in Alexander's life at a pivotal moment. Harrington Innovations had just faced a major legal threat from a competitor. She swooped in, turned the narrative around, and elevated the company's brand to new heights. Alexander was impressed. So impressed, in fact, that he barely noticed how her presence started to eclipse. Sophia's in many ways. Cassandra was tall, raven-haired, and always impeccably dressed. Her cunning intellect was matched by a magnetic personality that pulled people in. Some called her a corporate savior, an unstoppable force who used charm like a weapon. But rumors began to swirl at the office, small at first, suggesting that Cassandra and Alexander were sharing more than just business meetings. People at Harrington Innovations tried not to gossip, but it was impossible not to notice how Cassandra lingered just a moment longer than necessary near Alexander, how his eyes sometimes sparkled when she entered a room. Sophia, for her part, was not naive. She had heard the whispers. She'd noticed her husband's phone lighting up late at night, the texts he dismissed with a forced shrug, the dinners that went on longer than usual. Yet in her optimism, she wanted to believe it was simply high-pressure business or an upcoming media campaign. When she summoned the courage to confront him, Alexander brushed away her concerns with a charismatic laugh, a warm embrace, and the promise that Cassandra was just a colleague no more. But doubt lay like a crack in the foundation of their marriage. And that crack began to widen when rumors turned into sightings of Alexander and Cassandra in unexpected places: hotel lobbies, exclusive restaurants, charity galas. The stage was set for a scandal that would rock their world. The dinner party at their newly renovated mansion was supposed to be a celebration of success, a moment of respite and unity. But a single seat left empty for Sophia would become the spark that ignited an inferno of revelations. Sophia was now 7 months pregnant. Her belly had grown round and heavy, and although she glowed with maternal joy, she felt exhausted by the constant swirl of Alexander's business dealings. She clung to the idea that this dinner would bring the two of them closer, that by sharing a special meal with his closest colleagues and friends, Alexander would showcase how important she truly was to him. Guests began arriving in a stream of expensive cars. The Harrington mansion, an opulent Italianate estate perched on a bluff, gleamed under the setting sun. Its marble floors and hand-carved staircases were polished to perfection. The chandeliers reflected in the glass walls that overlooked a manicured rose garden. Sophia made sure that each guest felt personally welcomed, even though the stress and the late term of her pregnancy made her movements slow. To help with the party, Alexander had hired a renowned chef from France. The staff bustled with trays of hors d'oeuvre, champagne flutes, and sparkling cider, Sophia's drink of choice for the evening. Everywhere one turned, there was the scent of money, success, and celebration. Then came the hush that rolled through the foyer. Standing at the threshold was Cassandra Leclerc, dressed in a sleek, midnight blue gown. She exuded confidence. Her eyes searched the crowd until they locked on Alexander, who was at the center of the room, greeting guests with a trademark, charismatic smile. With a dazzling grin, Cassandra glided toward him, ignoring the looks of curiosity and envy thrown her way. "Mr. Harrington," she said lightly, placing a hand on his arm, "I hope I'm not late." Alexander, caught momentarily off guard, recovered quickly. "Not at all, Cassandra." "Right on time," he said, and turned to gesture at the staff. "Please ensure Miss Leclerc has everything she needs." Sophia noticed the exchange from across the room and forced herself to stay calm. She could feel her pulse quicken. This was the moment, the intersection of her hopes for unity and the sinking suspicion that Alexander's colleague meant trouble. But she refused to make a scene. She was the hostess, and pregnant. It wouldn't do to let personal insecurities overshadow this night. She consoled herself with the idea that Alexander would publicly acknowledge her as the mother of his child and the love of his life. As the guests drifted into the main banquet hall, each seat bore a gold-embroidered name card. Alexander and Sophia were to sit at the head of the table. The seat immediately to Alexander's right was reserved for his pregnant wife, a literal place of honor. But no one had yet settled into their seats, as the reception portion was still in full swing in the adjoining salon. Sophia's plan was to refresh herself for a moment in the powder room, take a few deep breaths, and then make a grand entrance at Alexander's side before the meal officially began. It was a small flourish of drama she allowed herself, wanting to remind everyone she was not just a pregnant bystander, but a dynamic partner in Alexander's life. As Sophia retreated briefly, Cassandra spotted the name card with elaborate script Mistress Sophia Harrington beside the seat for Alexander Harrington. A curious smile played on her lips. The seat was the pinnacle of acknowledgement, the physical representation of her rival's importance. Cassandra's gaze flickered over the seat, then back at the corridor where Sophia had vanished. When the butler announced that dinner was ready to be served, the guests moved into the banquet hall in a gracious flow of silks and tailored suits. Alexander escorted a few high-profile investors, ensuring they took seats near him so they could continue their business chatter. The entire table was arranged meticulously, with place settings shining in the candlelight and gentle music humming in the background. Sophia, having just reapplied a touch of lipstick, pressed her palm over her belly and inhaled deeply. She told herself that once she entered, she would approach Alexander from behind, lean in, and share an intimate moment with her husband before taking her rightful seat. This subtle gesture would demonstrate to the world, and especially to Cassandra, that she and Alexander were undeniably bonded. Despite her doubts, she believed this evening might even mend the growing rift between them. But an unexpected ripple of whispers rolled through the room. As Sophia stepped into the hall, her eyes swept to the head of the table. There, seated to Alexander's right, in her seat, was none other than Cassandra Leclerc. At first, Sophia stood frozen, unable to process what her eyes were telling her. The gold-embossed name card that read Sophia Harrington was lying face down on the crisp tablecloth. Cassandra, radiant and elegant, was leaning in toward Alexander, whispering something that made him laugh. He reached for his wine glass, took a sip, and only then noticed the presence of his wife standing at the entrance alone. The laughter died on Alexander's lips as he realized the implication of what Cassandra had done. One would think he might leap up, apologize profusely, and escort Cassandra to her designated seat. But shock stole his reaction. For a split second, Alexander's face betrayed a bewildered helplessness that made Sophia's stomach twist. She expected him to correct the situation. She expected him to gently guide Cassandra away from her place of honor. Yet, in that moment of hesitation, everything seemed to slow down. Guests looked from Alexander to Sophia, registering the awkward, humiliating tableau. "Darling," he finally managed, clearing his throat. His voice trailed off. Cassandra remained where she was, a faint, knowing smirk on her face. Sophia, feeling unsteady on her feet, turned to look at the butler. The poor man was wringing his hands, unsure how to handle the impropriety of a guest who had decided to seat herself in the lady of the house's spot. Sophia tried to calm her racing heart. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," she said in a voice that wavered. "Cassandra, your place card is a few seats down." Cassandra's smile didn't falter. She simply glanced at Sophia as though she were addressing an assistant. "Oh, was that meant for you? My apologies, I must have missed it," she cooed, reaching for the card with languid grace. "But since I'm already settled, wouldn't it be easier if we just let it be for tonight?" She looked at Alexander with wide, innocent eyes. Alexander opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a jumble of stuttered sounds. Time seemed to slow, the spectacle building. Every second he failed to correct this injustice felt like an eternity. A wave of nausea suddenly swept over Sophia. Standing there, pregnant, physically uncomfortable, and emotionally devastated, she realized she could not endure a public tussle over a chair. So instead, she swallowed every shred of pride, forced a tight smile, and lowered her gaze. The seat that should have been hers now radiated Cassandra's triumph. With trembling legs, she quietly took the seat originally meant for Cassandra, 3 chairs away from Alexander and from the center of the table's conversation. Dinner progressed in a grotesque pantomime of sophistication. The guests, many of them old money elites, tried to mask their discomfort behind polite small talk. But the drama at the head of the table was palpable. Cassandra took every opportunity to laugh, lean toward Alexander, and casually place a hand on his arm. Alexander, cornered by his own indecision, tried awkwardly to pivot the conversation toward business expansions and philanthropic initiatives. But the damage was done. Sophia's humiliation was obvious. From Sophia's vantage point, each course felt like an ordeal. The French chef's exquisite delicacies, veloute soup, truffled mushroom risotto, roasted duck might as well have been cardboard, for all she could taste. Her appetite had evaporated the moment Cassandra claimed her seat. Her mind whirled with questions. Was Alexander secretly endorsing Cassandra's bold behavior? Was this their twisted way of going public with an affair? Or was he simply too stunned to act? Meanwhile, her unborn baby stirred within her, reminding her of the life they had created, the life that deserved a stable, loving home. Tears threatened to break free, but Sophia fought them back, determined to maintain her dignity in front of the guests. She carefully forked small bites of food, feigning a half-smile whenever a neighbor at the table tried to engage her. Near the dessert course, a hush descended once again. A high-profile investor, Gregory Whitlock, a close associate of Alexander's, decided to address the elephant in the room. Clearing his throat, Gregory stood to make a toast. "I'd like to congratulate Alexander on another successful quarter for Harrington Innovations," he began, raising his champagne glass. "But more importantly, I'd like to honor the lovely Sophia, who has blessed us all with the news of the upcoming Harrington heir." He turned his gaze to her in a show of respect. Sophia managed a gracious nod, silently thanking him for acknowledging her. She could sense his attempt to mitigate the tension that had overshadowed the evening. Yet no sooner had the toast concluded than Cassandra leaned in to whisper something in Alexander's ear. He nodded and gave a slight smile. Perhaps it was a private joke, but it felt like a dismissal of the toast's intention to spotlight Sophia. Her heart twisted. After dessert, Alexander abruptly announced that the dinner portion was coming to an end, and they would move to the drawing room for after-dinner drinks and coffee. The staff began clearing plates with swift efficiency. Usually, it was Sophia's role to lead the hostess duties, ensuring guests felt comfortable. But she felt marooned, stranded in heartbreak. As the others migrated to the drawing room, she lingered behind, feeling her belly tense. Gregory paused beside her. "Are you all right, Sophia?" he asked quietly. She forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just feeling a bit overwhelmed with the pregnancy and all." He looked as though he wanted to say more, but swallowed his words. With a gentle pat on her shoulder, Gregory followed the others. Sophia took another moment to steel herself before slowly making her way into the drawing room, where the next chapter of the night would unfold, for better or worse. The drawing room was a lavish space lined with mahogany bookshelves and filled with plush armchairs. A glowing fireplace added warmth, and the staff circulated with trays of cognac, coffee, and sparkling water. Small clusters of guests engaged in animated conversation, occasionally glancing over to watch the dynamic between Alexander, Cassandra, and Sophia. Sophia discovered she could no longer mask her distress. With the weight of her pregnancy, both physically and emotionally, she needed a reprieve. She excused herself from a group of acquaintances and slipped into a side corridor. The corridor led to Alexander's private study, a place she rarely went. She simply needed a quiet corner away from prying eyes. No sooner had she closed the door behind her than she heard footsteps. She turned, expecting it to be a well-meaning guest or a concerned staff member. Instead, it was Alexander. "Sophia," he said, breathless, as though he had rushed. "Are you okay? How could you let this happen?" she asked in a trembling whisper. Tears finally blurred her eyes. "Why didn't you do anything when Cassandra took my seat?" Alexander ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a sign of genuine stress. "Look, it all happened so fast. I was shocked. I didn't want to cause a scene." She swallowed hard. "A scene? Alexander, I'm your wife. I'm 7 months pregnant with your child. You think me having my rightful seat at the table would have caused a scene? This is our home. Everyone saw how I was humiliated." He paused, contrition on his face. "You're right. I should have done something. I should have—" "Then why didn't you?" he exhaled, looking away. Because I didn't want to offend Cassandra. She's done a lot for the company. We're on the brink of some major expansions, and she's negotiating critical deals." He shook his head, as though trying to gather his thoughts. I know how this looks, but you have to believe me, I never wanted you to feel disrespected. Her anger flared, but her sorrow ran deeper. And what about me? Is there any part of you that worries about offending the woman who carries your child? That question hung in the charged silence. Alexander's face contorted with guilt. Sophia, he said softly, stepping toward her, you're everything to me. This baby is everything to me. Then show it, she cried, tears slipping down her cheeks. I've watched you work yourself to the bone, traveling constantly, and I've tried to be understanding. I know Harrington Innovations is your dream, but I'm your wife. Where do I fit in your dream if I'm not even important enough to claim my seat at the table? He reached out to wipe her tears. For a second, the vulnerability in his eyes reminded her of the man she married, someone who was sincere, passionate, and loving. I'm sorry, he whispered. I promise, I'll fix this. She didn't fully believe him, but she wanted to. Then you need to set boundaries with Cassandra, or whoever else threatens our marriage. He nodded, lowering his voice. You have my word. Just then, the door creaked open. Cassandra stood there, silhouetted against the light from the corridor. Oh, pardon me, she said lightly, though there was little apology in her tone. I was just looking for Alexander. Some of the guests are asking about the next charity project with Harrington Innovations. Sophia felt Alexander's hand slip away from hers. He hesitated, torn between the vow he had just made to his wife and his sense of corporate obligation. After a beat, he turned to Cassandra. Give me 5 minutes, he said firmly. Cassandra gave a small, cold smile. Of course, I'll let them know. Her eyes flickered over to Sophia, the slightest glimmer of victory dancing across them before she closed the door. Sophia felt her heart sink further. Alexander looked at her, guilt etched on every feature. I need to address this. I promise I'll be back soon. Tears still wet on her cheeks. Sophia swallowed her pride once more. Go, she whispered. He departed, leaving her alone in the study, the echo of the door shutting behind him, reverberating in her mind. She wondered if his promises carried any weight at all, or if her seat at the table would remain empty for good. The night ended in a haze, while the guests gradually trickled out, offering polite goodbyes and heartfelt thanks for the luxurious evening. The tension remained as thick as fog. Sophia forced herself to appear gracious at the entrance hall, thanking each person for coming. She was too well bred to let her heartbreak overshadow her hostess duties. But her spirit felt like it had been reduced to shards. Cassandra slipped away without a formal farewell to Sophia, simply offering a charming wave to Alexander from afar. Once the grand doors closed for the final time, Alexander let out a sigh that echoed across the empty marble foyer. When he turned to face Sophia, she was already making her way upstairs. He called after her, but she didn't respond, her footsteps measured and slow, courtesy of her advanced pregnancy. She had no energy left for conflict, no desire to talk anymore. Tonight, she needed rest and the solace of knowing she was doing her best for her unborn child, no matter how messy their home life had become. Alexander spent the night in the study, nursing his regrets with a half-finished glass of whiskey. Sleep eluded him. His thoughts refused to settle. He knew he'd allowed Cassandra too much leeway. He knew he had a massive debt to repay to his wife. Yet, ironically, he also felt cornered by the magnitude of Cassandra's role in his company's success. When dawn arrived, he went upstairs to find Sophia. She hadn't left the bedroom. She lay in bed, exhaustion etched onto her face. She'd cried herself to sleep. He approached cautiously, placing a gentle hand on the curve of her belly. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick with remorse. "I'm a complete idiot." Alex," she replied quietly. "I don't want to fight again. Not right now. Just Tell me what we're going to do from here." He bowed his head. "I'll handle Cassandra," he promised once more. "And I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you and our child that I'm here, truly here." Those words hung in the air like a delicate vow. Sophia wanted to believe him. She placed a hand over his, feeling the subtle stirring of the baby. Perhaps the crisis wasn't too big to overcome if they dealt with it honestly and immediately. Little did they know, Cassandra had plans of her own, ones that threatened to undermine any attempt at reconciliation. Cassandra Leclerc was not a woman prone to introspection. She lived in the moment, fueled by ambition and an unshakable confidence in her ability to shape the narrative around her. To her, the dinner incident had been a triumphant step in solidifying her position, not just at Harrington Innovations, but in Alexander's life. She wanted power, influence, and prestige. She wanted to be linked to the Harrington name in more than just a professional capacity, even if that meant playing dirty. In the days following the dinner, Cassandra continued to text and call Alexander at odd hours. She used every excuse imaginable: a new partnership deal with a European tech giant, an exclusive interview request from a major financial magazine, an urgent need for Alexander's signature on upcoming contracts. Each time she attempted to blur the lines between business and personal, she'd pepper her calls with little compliments. "I loved the suit you wore yesterday. You looked so powerful." Or, "You must be so proud of how you've turned your father's inheritance into an empire." The flattery was subtle but constant. Sophia, trying to hold Alexander to his word, insisted on attending more corporate events by his side. She wasn't well versed in the intricacies of software licensing deals, but she showed up, softly radiant with her pregnant glow. She mingled with potential partners and established a presence that reminded everyone, including Cassandra, that Miss S. Harrington had not disappeared. But Cassandra was cunning. At one such event, she managed to corner Sophia in the bathroom lounge. "You look radiant, Sophia," Cassandra purred, leaning against the marble vanity. "Pregnancy suits you." Sophia forced a tight smile. "Thank you. It's wonderful that you're taking an interest in the business these days." Cassandra studied her manicured nails. "Though you must be careful not to overexert yourself. This late in pregnancy, you need rest more than anything." "I appreciate your concern," Sophia replied coolly, "but I'm more than capable of knowing my limits." Cassandra feigned concern. "Of course. I just wouldn't want to see you push yourself too far, especially when Alexander needs you in good health." She paused, eyes flickering with an unnamed challenge. "He needs us both to be at our best for the company." Sophia's heart tightened. "He's my husband," she said softly but firmly. "I believe he needs me a bit more than he needs you." A hint of steel underlay Cassandra's grin. "I admire your confidence, Sophia, truly." And with that, she slipped out of the bathroom, leaving Sophia's anger and doubts simmering in the fluorescent light. Time marched on, and Sophia's due date drew near. Her doctor advised her to reduce stress. But how could she when Cassandra's presence loomed like a storm cloud? The tension in the Harrington household was palpable. Alexander tried to juggle it all: his empire, the demands of an ambitious mistress, and a pregnant wife craving emotional security. One night, as Alexander and Sophia sat down for a quiet dinner at home, the phone buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID and tensed. It was Cassandra. Sophia laid her fork down. "Are you going to answer that?" she asked, bracing herself. "I have to," Alexander sighed, rising from the table. "It might be important." She nodded, but her eyes betrayed how tired she was of this routine. He retreated to his office, shutting the door. Minutes turned into an hour. The food went cold. Sophia's appetite vanished. When he finally reappeared, he found her in the living room, her feet propped on a cushion, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. "That was a business call," he began, his tone defensive. She's finalizing details for a major collaboration. I can't keep doing this, Sophia said. Her voice trembled with raw hurt. I'm about to give birth, and you're in there finalizing details with the woman who took my seat at our own dinner table. Alexander's frustration flared. I told you, it's work. She's leading the negotiation. We're days away from signing a huge contract with international partners. She rose, her belly making every move cumbersome. And after that, will there always be a new deal, a new crisis, another reason why you need her around? When does it end? He raked a hand through his hair. I don't know. I'm trying to provide for us for our child. Sophia let out a sharp laugh, tinged with bitterness. We're millionaires, Alex. Don't pretend. This is about putting food on the table. This is about your ego. You can't let go of the high-stakes expansion, the applause, and maybe the attention from Cassandra. Her accusation lit a spark in him. That's not fair, isn't it? She shot back. Silence swallowed them. Finally, Alexander spoke, voice subdued. I'll end this after the deal, I promise. She'll be reassigned or offered a generous severance. I just need her through this critical phase. Sophia stared at him, uncertain whether to trust his word again. If that's your decision, she said quietly, I'll give you until the baby is born. By then, choose me and our child, or her, because this can't continue. A heavy hush settled in the room, sealing the ultimatum. Alexander nodded slowly. He approached her, placing a hand on her stomach. I choose us, he whispered. I love you. But that night, as they lay in bed, turned away from each other, both knew a line had been drawn in the sand. Days melted into weeks. Sophia's contractions started late one afternoon, while Alexander was at an off-site meeting. She felt the first pang, sharp and undeniable, while trying to reorganize the nursery. Panic and excitement flared simultaneously. She called Alexander, her voice wavering with a mixture of fear and joy. I need you home. It's happening. He wasted no time. Within half an hour, he was rushing into the house, a flurry of anxious energy. Sophia, I'm here. I'm here, he kept repeating, as though to assure himself as much as her. Together, they grabbed the pre-packed hospital bag and sped to the nearest private hospital. For hours, Sophia labored, sweat beading on her brow. Alexander held her hand, speaking words of encouragement. As the pain intensified, tears of fear and determination slipped down her cheeks. In that room, it was just the two of them against the storm of childbirth, the closeness that had once defined their marriage flickering back to life. He stroked her hair, promising he'd never leave her side again, that he'd fix everything once the baby arrived. Finally, at the stroke of midnight, a piercing cry broke the tension. Their daughter arrived. The newborn's tiny wail filled the room, and tears of relief and love shone in Alexander's eyes. Sophia cradled the baby, marveling at this perfect little life. Alexander pressed a trembling kiss to his wife's forehead. In that moment, the drama with Cassandra and the business deals seemed a world away. They were a family now, bound by something far more powerful than money or ambition. Sophia allowed herself to hope that the worst was behind them. Alexander took 2 weeks of paternity leave, something that stunned his colleagues, who were used to him being a workaholic. In those precious days, he was fully present, changing diapers, rocking the baby to sleep, cooking simple dinners. Sophia felt a glimmer of the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had promised to stand by her through thick and thin. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed. Cassandra continued to send messages, none of which Alexander answered. During the baby's first week, he turned his phone off for entire afternoons, dedicating his attention to the newborn. It felt like progress, a step toward fulfilling his vow. Then, just before his paternity leave ended, an envelope arrived at the Harrington mansion. It bore no return address. Intrigued, Alexander opened it. Inside, There were photographs, dozens of them. Grainy but unmistakable pictures of him and Cassandra at various places, some business-related, some not so innocent. They ranged from a quiet dinner where they'd shared a bottle of wine to the hotel conference in Miami where Cassandra had rested her hand on his shoulder a bit too familiarly. And then, in the back of the stack, was a photo of them kissing. Sophia, cradling the baby in the living room, heard Alexander's sharp intake of breath. "What is it?" she asked, glancing up. He froze, as though considering whether to hide the evidence. Guilt gnawed at him. Finally, he sighed and handed her the envelope. She flipped through the photos with trembling hands, her eyes brimming with tears. This was the proof she had prayed she'd never have to see, a tangible record of her husband's betrayal. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It wasn't just a passing flirtation. You—" She took a shaky breath, trying not to cry in front of their baby. "You had an affair." "Sophia, please," he said, reaching out a pleading hand. "It's over. It ended before the baby came." "Those pictures are old." She recoiled, pressing a protective hand against the baby's head. "You kept telling me it was just business. But this—" He bowed his head, tears threatening in his own eyes. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know these photos existed. This must be blackmail. Someone wants to use them against us or the company." Sophia shook her head, tears streaming now. "Blackmail? Alexander, I just gave birth to your child, and you're talking about blackmail? Don't you see that's not the point? The point is, you betrayed me repeatedly, and let me think I was just being jealous or insecure." His voice cracked. "I love you and our baby. I was stupid and selfish. I never wanted to hurt you. I promise I'll make this right." "How?" she demanded, voice trembling. "How can you possibly fix this? Our marriage is built on a lie." He hesitated, then seemed to steel himself. "We'll handle the blackmailers legally if we must. We'll get rid of Cassandra. She's part of the past. She's not who I want. I want you and our daughter." Sophia stared at him through blurred vision, struggling with the avalanche of emotions, rage, sorrow, betrayal, love for her newborn, hope and despair, all tangled into one. Finally, unable to speak, she turned away, clutching the baby as though she were her only lifeline. Alexander wasted no time. He contacted his private investigator, hiring him to find out who had sent the photos. In parallel, he made a bold move. He officially terminated Cassandra's contract with Harrington Innovations. He left no ambiguity in his directive. He wanted no further involvement, personal or professional. When Cassandra received the news, she was livid. She stormed into the Harrington Innovations headquarters, bypassing the receptionist. Staff members gaped as she marched through the glass corridors, an unstoppable whirlwind of fury. Alexander stood in his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. He saw her coming and ended the call. "Cassandra," he said, bracing himself, "this is not the time or place." She slammed a folder onto his desk. "You're really ending my contract? After everything I've done for you? For the company? For us?" His voice was calm but resolute. "Yes, we're done. The final negotiations for the overseas deal have been transitioned to another PR executive. Security will escort you out." Her eyes blazed. "You can't do this to me. I know things, Alexander." "You think I won't talk? You think I won't drag your name through every tabloid?" He exhaled, shoulders tense. "I've already briefed my legal team. If you try to slander me or the company, we'll see you in court for defamation. As for our personal past, it's over. I'm going to focus on my wife and my child." For a moment, Cassandra appeared shocked. Then she sneered, leaning in. "Don't think you can scare me with lawsuits. We both know the media loves a scandal." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "But you're forgetting something, Alexander. I'm not the one who's married. You are. Who do you think will suffer more if this all goes public? He stood firm, jaw clenched. It's a risk I'm willing to take. Now get out of my office. She stared at him with disbelief, as if she never imagined he'd have the backbone to do this. Then, with a bitter laugh, she snatched her folder and stormed out. Security politely but firmly escorted her from the building. But Cassandra was not one to retreat quietly. She burned with humiliation and revenge. If Alexander Harrington thought a simple contract termination would rid him of her, he was mistaken. While Alexander fought the battles on the corporate front, Sophia wrestled with her own inner turmoil. The baby's first month was an emotional roller coaster. She loved her daughter fiercely, but her marriage hung by a thread. Despite Alexander's efforts cutting ties with Cassandra, beginning the search for the blackmailer, and showing up more in fatherly ways, Sophia couldn't forget the images in that envelope. Night after night, she lay awake, hearing the baby's soft breathing in the bassinet. She'd glance at Alexander, who often lay staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Unspoken tension filled the room. Sometimes in the dark he'd whisper, "I'm sorry," and she'd shut her eyes, too exhausted or hurt to respond. Outside the bedroom, the mansion felt ghostly. The once grand halls now seemed overshadowed by heartbreak. Even the staff walked on eggshells, aware that something monumental had cracked within the Harrington household. Sophia considered leaving. Her mother had offered to let her stay for a while in her childhood home, away from the scandal and the reminders of Alexander's betrayal. But every time she thought about packing her bags, her mind would drift to their child. Did she want her daughter to grow up without a father? Or should she fight for a marriage that might be salvageable? Alexander, for his part, tried every day to prove his commitment. He left the office earlier, cancelled non-essential travel, and spent his evenings reading parenting books, rocking the baby to sleep, or cooking Sophia's favorite meals. Yet each tender moment was tainted by guilt. He knew words weren't enough. He needed a grand gesture, something that would truly show he'd changed. Just as the Harringtons tried to regain some semblance of peace, a bombshell landed. An online gossip blog leaked several of the incriminating photos of Alexander and Cassandra. The headline screamed, "Billionaire Alexander Harrington's scandalous affair." Within hours, tabloids and social media platforms picked up the story. People dissected every photograph, speculating whether the affair was ongoing and how Sophia would respond. Alexander's phone blew up with calls from concerned investors, outraged partners, and sympathetic friends. Crisis teams from Harrington Innovations scrambled to do damage control, issuing statements that half-heartedly dismissed the photos as old and out of context. But the truth was evident. Alexander had been unfaithful. At the mansion, paparazzi lurked outside the gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the scorned wife or the man at the center of the storm. The once private sanctuary turned into a spectacle. Sophia felt her last shred of privacy slip away. She couldn't even take the baby out for a stroll without risking a swarm of cameras. The humiliation was public, relentless, and all-consuming. One morning, as the baby napped, Sophia stared at her phone, scrolling through hateful comments on social media. People called her gullible, weak, gold digger, while others pitied her, encouraging her to leave him. She felt numb. Alexander knelt beside her, gently taking the phone from her hands. "Stop reading that garbage," he said softly. "It's not garbage," she murmured. "It's the reality we're living in." He clenched his jaw. "I'm going to fix this, Sophie. I swear." She looked at him, tears welling up. "Alexander, the only fix that matters is the one in our marriage. I don't care about the tabloids if you and I can be okay. But can we be okay?" A pained look flickered across his features. "I don't know," he whispered, voice filled with regret. "But I'll die trying." Alexander held a press conference to address the scandal. Standing at a podium in the Harrington Innovations boardroom, he apologized for the images that have surfaced, stating they represented a regrettable lapse in his personal life. He took full responsibility, asking for privacy so his family could heal. The statement wasn't flashy or cunning, it was honest and vulnerable. PR experts might have called it a bad move, but Alexander was done with half-truths. When he returned home that evening, Sophia was in the nursery, rocking their daughter. He entered quietly, swallowing hard at the sight of them, mother and child, innocent of his sins. He approached and pressed a gentle kiss on his baby's forehead, then on Sophia's temple. "I resigned as CEO today," he said suddenly. Sophia's head jerked up. "What? Why?" he exhaled. "I'm temporarily stepping down to focus on us. I think it's the right thing to do. The board will select an interim CEO. Meanwhile, we can get away from here, maybe go somewhere quiet, far from the paparazzi." She stared at him, speechless. For someone like Alexander, whose identity was tightly interwoven with his success at Harrington Innovations, this was a monumental sacrifice. A tangible sign that he was willing to put family before ambition. "I can't promise it'll fix everything," he continued, "but I want to show you and our daughter that you come first now, always." Sophia fought back tears. This was the grand gesture she never expected. She didn't know if it would erase the pain, but it was a start. She reached out, letting him wrap his arms around her and the baby. For the first time since the dinner fiasco, she felt a flicker of genuine hope. They decided to go to a secluded villa in the countryside of Tuscany, an escape from the media circus. With the baby in tow, they traveled discreetly, ensuring no paparazzi followed. In a quaint little stone villa overlooking rolling hills of vineyards and olive groves, the Harringtons tried to rebuild their bond. Days passed in simple routines, homemade breakfasts, walks under the warm sun, late-night talks by a crackling fireplace. Slowly, they began to communicate honestly about Cassandra, the betrayal, the fear, and the love that had been overshadowed. Alexander confessed that his affair with Cassandra had been more than a single indiscretion. It was an emotional escape from the pressure he felt in business. He felt validated by Cassandra's constant praise and admiration, which fed his ego in a way he hadn't realized he craved. But in the end, the fleeting thrill was nothing compared to the heartbreak it caused. Sophia, for her part, admitted her own guilt at times. She realized she had let Alexander shoulder the entire burden of the business without offering enough empathy. She was so invested in their future child, she sometimes forgot to reassure Alexander that he was loved, not just needed. Although it didn't excuse his actions, understanding each other's emotional states helped them reconcile. The baby thrived in the peaceful atmosphere. Each giggle, each tiny coo seemed like a promise that life could be beautiful again. As the stress melted away, Alexander and Sophia found moments of laughter, like when the baby burped mid-kiss, or when they tried to replicate the chef's fancy dinner from that fateful night and ended up with burnt pasta. At times, Sophia would recall Cassandra's smug face at the dinner table, and the memory stung. But then Alexander would hold her hand, look into her eyes and say, "I'm here now," and for once, she believed him. Just when it seemed life was turning around, a call from the private investigator shattered the tranquility. The blackmailer had been identified. It was none other than Gregory Whitlock, the investor who had toasted Sophia at the dinner party. The man had apparently formed a partnership with Cassandra to manipulate Alexander. They hoped to create a scandal big enough to force Alexander into a precarious position, either to gain leverage in business negotiations or to dethrone him as CEO, so they could profit from subsequent deals. Sophia listened on speakerphone, shock written all over her face. Gregory had always seemed so supportive. Yet behind the scenes, he and Cassandra had orchestrated the photo leak, meticulously saving every compromising moment. Cassandra's bold move at the dinner table, taking Sophia's seat, was part of the game, a public power play that would fuel the rumor mills. Alexander's cheeks burned with rage and embarrassment. He had been manipulated like a pawn. However, he realized that in stepping down as CEO, he had inadvertently undermined their entire plan. Gregory's scheme relied on Alexander clinging desperately to power, making him easy to extort. But Alexander's resignation deprived them of that leverage. In the aftermath, Alexander and his legal team pressed charges against Gregory for blackmail and extortion. Evidence was gathered, testimonies were filed, and the corporate world buzzed with rumors of Gregory Whitlock's shady dealings. Cassandra, it appeared, had vanished, likely fleeing to avoid legal consequences. For Sophia, the revelation was a jarring reminder of how cunning and relentless some people can be in pursuit of wealth and influence. But in the end, the knowledge also provided closure. Cassandra's stunt at the dinner table was not simply an affair's arrogance, it was part of a grander scheme. That didn't absolve Alexander from blame, but it clarified the level of manipulation at play. With the blackmailers exposed and Cassandra gone, Alexander and Sophia returned to Boston, where they found a changed landscape. The tabloid scandal had begun to cool. New salacious headlines captured the public's attention elsewhere. Investors who had threatened to withdraw their support returned, reassured by the stability of Harrington Innovations' new leadership. The company was in no risk of collapse. In fact, many employees voiced their appreciation for Alexander's honesty and the steps he took to shield them from the drama. Sophia still felt pangs of lingering hurt. Healing from betrayal, especially one as public as theirs, would take time. She and Alexander started couples counseling, a move that felt both daunting and hopeful. Week by week, they stripped away their defenses, learning healthier ways to communicate. The counselors guided them through the labyrinth of trust-building exercises, ensuring they didn't merely bury their pain beneath forced smiles. One evening, Alexander surprised Sophia with a private vow renewal ceremony. Under a canopy of fairy lights in their backyard, he spoke from the heart. Tears flowed freely as he pledged anew to cherish her, honor their family, and never again let his ego or ambition overshadow his love for her. Sophia, in turn, vowed to be his partner in every sense, to share not just the joys of parenthood, but the burdens he faced at work and in life. Their baby daughter gurgled happily in the background, as if giving her blessing. The seat at the dinner table, once a symbol of betrayal, now served as a reminder of the night everything changed. But with redemption and honest efforts, Alexander and Sophia found that sometimes the deepest cracks could be filled with resilient love. It might never look perfect again, but it could be stronger in a new way. And so, dear viewers, this roller coaster of betrayal, scandal, and redemption draws to a close. Alexander and Sophia's journey reminds us that even in the glittering world of millionaires, heartbreak and second chances can play out in ways that resonate with our own experiences. In the end, their seat at the dinner table wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of belonging, commitment, and respect, one that, once taken away, had to be reclaimed through courage and love. If you found yourself gripped by the drama, touched by the heartbreak, and inspired by the hope that shines through adversity, we invite you to join our community. Like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more stories that delve into the human heart, the cost of ambition, and the power of perseverance. Your support helps keep these stories coming. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, stay inspired.